So divorcing homeowners often have a lot of questions when it comes to their home. And one of the questions I hear is, will I have to go to court to sell my home? Well, every divorce is different. So the answer is, of course, it's going to be, it depends. It depends on you. It depends on your spouse. And often it depends on the attorneys. So in a divorce, all of your assets, including your home, are going to need to be divided. So if you and your spouse can agree on how the assets are to be divided, you can either file it yourself with a court, or if you're working with an attorney, your attorney can file it on your behalf. So you don't need to necessarily go through a judge, but you will need to get it filed with the court. So when it comes to the agreements with your home, there's a few things that you need to understand first. Number one is, what's the value of your home? Before you can make any kind of decisions about dividing the assets, you're going to need to know what the value is of your home. So I suggest you either get an appraiser to do it for you, or you work with a certified divorce real estate expert like myself, and we can do what's called a fair market value. Next, you're going to need to understand, how much equity do you actually have in the home? So the equity is determined by, number one, what's the value? And then, are there any liens or mortgages against the property? So you're going to take your value minus everything you owe against the property. And again, if there are any liens, and then that is going to be your equity. The next thing you're going to need to understand is, can one of you buy out the other's interest in the property? Now, sometimes can be done by what we call trading assets. So maybe you decide you want to keep the home, and your husband decides he wants to keep the 401k, and they seem to be valued about the same. So this is often a huge mistake that we see people making, assuming that value is the same. But you do need to consider the tax consequences of them. So I suggest that you work with a certified divorce financial advisor to help you figure out, what is the value of the home, what's the equity, versus what are the other assets, and does it make sense for you to do a trade? Now, if you decide you want to keep the home and there is a mortgage, you're going to have to figure out a way to refinance the property or do the equity buyout. So that's another professional that I suggest that you talk with, and that would be a certified divorce lending professional. And they can help you figure out if you can truly afford to do the buyout and refinance the property. Next, you'll need to figure out, when is the transfer of the ownership going to take place? Are you going to do it before the divorce is finalized, or at some point as soon as the divorce is finalized? Or some people decide to keep the home for a little bit longer, say if they have children, and you want the children to stay in the home and be able to graduate. In all those situations, you're going to need to understand both the pros and the cons of each of those options. Next up, you're going to need to understand if there's any repairs that need to be done to the home. Is there any deferred maintenance? If you're going to sell the home, some of the repairs do need to be done prior to putting the home on the market. And if you're going to keep the home, you're going to need to understand what liabilities you're going to be assuming by taking on the home yourself. So let's say the roof needs to be replaced. Well, that might be something that you want to negotiate with your spouse as to how the roof repairs are going to be completed. Next up, as I mentioned previously, if you're going to do a buyout or your spouse is going to do the buyout, you need to figure out how the party that's not going to be staying in the home is going to be removing their financial responsibility. And by financial responsibility, typically I mean a mortgage. So if you're the one that's going to be moving out, you want to definitely make sure that you're not financially responsible for a home that, number one, you're no longer living in, and potentially no longer own any interest in the home. So what's the judge going to decide? Well, typically, if you just can't agree with your spouse on what's going to happen to the home, the judge will order that the home be sold and the proceeds be split. Sometimes they're 50-50, depending on your situation. Sometimes it could be another distribution depending on what other equity or what other assets that you have that are going to be divided. As I mentioned, the judge can decide how the equity is going to be divided. Sometimes if there's a 401k, or maybe there's some other personal property that one or the other of you want to keep, then the judge might decide that that's worth so much and the house is worth so much. So depending on all those situations, then the judge could decide on how the equity is going to be split. The last thing the judge could do is order that one or the other of you be given the home. And in this situation, again, as I mentioned earlier, if there is a mortgage involved, whoever keeps the home is going to have to figure out a way to be able to keep the mortgage and be able to get their spouse's name off of it. And typically that is either with a refinance or with a mortgage restatement. Some lenders will allow you to do that in a divorce situation. But again, like I said, every divorce is different. And so you need to understand you and your situation and potentially what other resources you might need to be able to make a great decision. And I've got lots of names for you. I'm more than happy to help you with that information. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to introduce you to whatever professional you need to be able to get all your answers, and so that you make a really good choice for you and your family, both now and in the long term. Well, if you have any other questions, please reach out to me regarding your home, that is. Please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any and all of your questions, and I will do so with the utmost in confidentiality. Well, thanks for listening. I do release new videos every week, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will get notified when the next video is released. Oh, and one more thing. If you found this video helpful, could you go ahead and hit that like button, because that'll help other people find this video as well, and maybe they'll be able to get the answers to the questions they have. Thank you.